Hey, it's Joe from supplementclarity.com. Today, let's talk about whether your mouthwash may raise your risk of high blood pressure. So the theory goes like this. Nitric oxide is a gas. We make it mostly in our blood vessels, but it's also made in our mouth and other places of our body. And one of the things it does many things, but one of those things is it lowers our blood pressure. Turns out that green vegetables, as well as beets, contain compounds called nitrates. And what happens is the chemical formula here is nitrates get converted into nitrites. Nitrites in turn get converted into nitric oxide, which in turn can lower our blood pressure. Well, here's the thing. The bacteria in our mouth, some of that bacteria can actually break down these nitrates, converting it into nitric oxide. Turns out that also some mouthwashes might also kill off those very same bacteria. The result is an increase in blood pressure. So this is the idea behind why some people are saying mouthwashes may raise the risk of hypertension. Sounds interesting, but is there any proof? So here's a study that got people buzzing from several years ago. It is essentially a rat study where they gave rats an antiseptic mouthwash while at the same time spiking their water with those nitric oxide nitrites to see what would happen. And they find that the mouthwash actually caused an increase in the blood pressure of these rats where it normally shouldn't have been, because remember, those nitrates raise nitric oxide level, but when they used that mouthwash, it abolished the blood pressure lowering effects of the nitric oxide. Sounds interesting, but it is again a rat study. What we really need are people studies such as this one, the physiological role of nitrate-reducing oral bacteria in blood pressure control. So now we're talking. So we got 19 healthy people. These are people with normal blood pressure. And for 2 1-week periods, their blood pressure is monitored. One just for a normal control period where they just want to make sure everything is good. And then the second 1-week period, they measure their blood pressure while they're using a chlorhexidine-based mouthwash. Hold on to that word for a minute, chlorhexidine. We'll talk about it in a minute. And they find that the chlorhexidine-based mouthwash, it reduced the nitrate production by the bacteria in their mouths by 90%, okay, and also in the blood by 25%. And that's interesting, but check this out. That mouthwash also caused an increase in both the systolic and diastolic blood pressure by about 2 to 3 points. So their nitric oxide levels in their mouth went down, nitric oxide levels in the blood went down, and that caused an increase in blood pressure by about 2 to 3 points. Both the systolic, the top number of the blood pressure fraction, and the diastolic blood pressure, that's the bottom number, went up by about 2 to 3 points. And this effect occurred after the very first day they used the mouthwash, and it continued for the entire 1-week study period. So that's really interesting. Not the end of the story. Check this one out. Over-the-counter mouthwash use, nitric oxide, and hypertension risk. So this is a much larger investigation. 540 people. They're middle-aged to older, and they're overweight. These individuals are followed for 3 years to see what happens. Essentially, these researchers come to the conclusion people who use mouthwash twice a day or more had a greater chance of getting hypertension, high blood pressure, compared to those who use mouthwash less frequently. Sounds pretty damning here, right? So, but the thing you got to realize is that when I read this study, I noticed that a lot of the people in this study who were using the mouthwash, they had more health problems, including hypertension and diabetes. That could play a role in this observation. And then the other thing is that this is an observational study. Essentially, they followed people for 3 years to see what happened. This is really great study, but it's not as good as a placebo-controlled randomized study, like, for instance, this one. The effect of antiseptic mouthwash on resting metabolic rate, a randomized double-blind crossover study. So, smaller investigation, 17 women with normal blood pressure are involved in this study. And essentially for 2 3-day periods, they measure their blood pressure. Essentially, this is what happens. They put them on a low nitric oxide producing diet, okay? One of these 3-day periods, they're given a chlorhexidine-based mouthwash to measure their blood pressure at the same time. And then another 3-day period, they give them this placebo mouthwash, which, if you're curious, is essentially an alcohol and water-based mouthwash to see what effects it might be. And they find that the chlorhexidine-based mouthwash, yeah, it disrupted those oral bacteria, sure, but it did not affect blood pressure. Blood pressure did not go up when they used that chlorhexidine-based mouthwash or the placebo mouthwash for that instance, and their resting metabolic rate was not affected either. So this kind of goes counter to the other studies which appear to show that a chlorhexidine mouthwash increases blood pressure. This one said it did not. Okay, so what are my thoughts on all this research? Number one, do all mouthwashes raise blood pressure and contribute to hypertension? I would say no. The research so far is really looking at what's called chlorhexidine-based mouthwash. If you've never heard of this before, realize this. If you're watching me in America, chlorhexidine mouthwash is something you only get through a prescription. You cannot go to the store and buy this over the counter. Your doctor, your dentist has to prescribe this. If you're in other countries, however, you may be able to get it over the counter. Most studies use people with normal blood pressure. I have yet to see a study which looked at a large number of people with hypertension and compared that to people who took maybe another type of mouthwash. Okay, and so that's something also I think we need more research on. Not all studies, in my opinion, are real life. Some of these investigations, as you saw, put people on a low nitric oxide producing diet. So, that may not be the real life for all of us. For instance, I'd like to see what happens if you give this mouthwash to people with, who are vegetarians or vegans, who normally eat a high nitric oxide producing diet. I'd also like to see what happens if you give this to people who exercise. Have people go out and run 3 miles, do a mouthwash to see what effect that might be with their blood pressure as well. Haven't seen that particular study done yet either. So far, one study appears to show that the chlorhexidine-based mouthwash may raise blood pressure by, again, 2 to 3 points on the blood pressure scale, which could be significant for people with hypertension. So again, if you're using this type of mouthwash, again, I think it's good to talk to your doctor or your dentist to see if this is the right thing for you. And then realize, lastly, that bad breath is complicated and a mouthwash alone may not get the job done. For instance, there is a link between gum disease and high blood pressure. So if you're looking to affect blood pressure, help your blood pressure, mouthwash may play a role in things, but I think it's not a substitute for a better, healthier overall diet. And again, using medication if possible and keeping in check with your doctor. So there you have it. There's my take on the mouthwash and hypertension controversy. Hope this helped you. And until next time, I'm Joe Cannon from supplementclarity.com. Take care, and I'll see you soon.